Hey guys, Forristicat here. I just wanted to put my thoughts today on the Walking Dead comics. Yeah, I was listening to a podcast where these guys were talking about the Walking Dead, and I thought, you know what, it would be nice to actually go ahead and actually read the comics because they were making references to them. And I thought, you know what, yeah, stuff it. I'll go and I got the comics, and I started reading them, and it's the first comic in a while that I've actually read. You probably know by my profile photo that I'm into Tintin, so that's the main comic I ever read. I didn't really get into much comics. I just got a couple of the Batman classics like the Dark Knight Returns, Batman Year One, The Long Halloween, etc. But nevertheless, it was good to finally get into a comic and sort of get that feeling back of what it's like to read a comic and understand the more psychological, cerebral process that goes into actually interpreting a piece of literature as opposed to watching a visual medium. So the first thing that struck me is that it's obviously a very dark comic, The Walking Dead. For those of you who don't know it, it's basically how a group of survivors adapt and survive a zombie apocalypse whilst trying to retain and hold on to any ounces of humanity that they have left within themselves. And it sort of gave my it sort of shifted my perspective on the show a little bit, because I just finished issue 93 today. They're leading up to 100 issues, and there's an ongoing theme. That's the ongoing theme in the comic. Pretty much is that if some massive disaster were to happen like this, there's still going to be problems sort of in humanity. It's just going to be on a different level. So where there's sort of like political battles, or like Cold Wars, or like war on paper or whatever nowadays, or sure there's conflict nowadays as well, like physical combat or whatever. But nevertheless, the problems would sort of been like the mirror will be held up, and with no sort of like formal civilization structure, with all that stripped away, you're sort of really left to your basic faculties in order to survive. And the main thing about the comic is like how much of the stuff that's actually going on for survival purposes can be justified, and is it really worth surviving if that takes away your humanity? In other words, like, would it be better to be dead or even a zombie than it would be to actually sort of survive, because having survived you would have had to have done all these sort of like horrible things in the process. And those who read the comic know what I'm talking about. So the writer is Robert Kirkman. He's the creator and writer of it. Also there's Charlie Aldrad, I think, who does the drawings, and there's also the person who does the shading. I didn't know that. That's the first time I learned that there's people that do different things, and there's one other person that does the lettering. I think the most latest issue 93 is like they were rushing it, because there were a couple of sort of like missed letters in the writing, and the pacing of the latest story wasn't very very good as well. Although I find it interesting that many times in the comic you reach points where it's like, okay, everything's going to be like smooth sailing from here on in. Like I said, the underlying problems still remain, that people still want to take what's not theirs. People sort of want to come up on one another. People want to sort of have power, this, that, and the other. So even though like you think, oh, okay, yeah, this is our best chance against the zombies, and it's fascinating to me that the number one threat is not the zombies. It's literally the humans. And there was one sort of really good moment in the comic where Rick, the main protagonist, he's giving like this speech where he's building up to the end, and I could see that it's getting towards the end of the comic, and then he's like says something like, and they always finish the comic with like a cliffhanger, and it sort of has like a massive sort of one-page sort of drawing of focusing on someone's face or something, and then he's building up to it, and then he goes to his the team members there. Don't you understand? We are the Walking Dead, which is saying that they're the ones that are sort of like losing all humanity, that might as well be a zombie, because they're doing all these cutthroat sort of tactics in order to survive. There was a story arc there where they went into a prison, and they meet this guy called the governor, and the governor is you initially think he's like he's a good guy, but then when Rick goes to the place where the governor is located, his community, it turns out that he's a tyrant. He's ruling over his people with fear, and he's trying to sort of distract them by hosting all these sort of fighting games, which is in the arena, which he sort of gets humans to fight each other with the zombies on the outskirts. There's another character there called Michonne, I think it's pronounced French, I think, who's black and who has a sword, and she is probably one of the best characters in the whole thing. Like, she's very sort of dark, and when you first see her, she's like walking with like two zombies like shackled at the back of her. I thought that was very interesting, and yeah, she's like a silent ninja. Like, she just kills zombies like very silently. And the governor story arc was sort of the first time I read it, I was like, wow, this is pretty crazy. Especially the sort of stuff that goes on, and there's one particular torture scene in there which, when I was reading, I was actually feeling the pain which I was reading on the comic. And then I was reading like the people writing in the comments to the comic, and yeah, people were sort of complaining, like, because Michonne basically gets raped in a scene by the governor, and people were saying there's a lot of racist comments which started flooding in from the fans, and people were saying why are you putting the torture scene in there, this, that, and the other, and Robert Kirkman was sort of sticking to his guns, saying, what, I'm not going to sort of like react to audiences' reactions in order to sort of steer the story in sort of a way that would please everybody, and you can't please everybody. So overall, I think the Walking Dead comic is pretty good. Actually, I'll say it's pretty. I can't say it's excellent, because there's a couple of sort of repetitious elements to the comic. In terms of sort of I don't know, it's sort of like they walk to a place, they find a place, they meet someone, they don't know if they can trust them or not. They sort of settle down for a little while, and then some sort of external force comes and disrupts everything. It sort of feels like that's sort of like what's going on here. But the latest story arc is sort of opening up like the wider world, and many people have written into the comics saying, what, Rob, you should probably like show how the other parts of the world are affected, like England, France, Australia, whatever. And he said, he definitely hasn't ruled that out. But one thing he has ruled out is that he's not going to end this story arc saying like Rick woke up, like it was all a dream, that there was no zombie apocalypse, and he doesn't really want to explain the origin of the zombie apocalypse. Yet in the TV series, sort of at the end of season 1, I think that scientists were sort of getting at sort of like the cure for it. And some people are writing the comic saying, why are you changing all these plot lines and having these characters out of the comic book, not in the actual story, and not in the Walking Dead TV series? And Rob's like, there's so many comics there's so many characters in a comic book. There'll be 50 characters on screen, and they'll each have one line each, just to please you. And I'm not going to do it this way. And also, if people have read the comic book, I don't want them to be sort of like this not motivated to watch the TV show, because they've already read the comic and they think it's going to be verbatim what's in the comic is on the screen. And I think that's fair enough. I think that I as much as I would like to sort of I would actually like to see the comic done sort of like in a very similar way, but at the same time I don't mind like that it's not like 100% adaptation, and because you can't do an adaptation, like I think that all these really dark it depends how dark they're going to go, and I hope they go as dark as the comic, because that's sort of the point of it. Like, you're doing all these dark things in order to survive. You're becoming like a killer. You're sort of developing like a killer instinct almost. Rick sort of says in one comic that like he didn't have to kill someone, but he did it because he wanted to. So the comic is very dark. Like, there's people dying all the time, and that's another thing about the comic. Like, no one is safe, but at the same time, like, it feels like people are dying all the time. I'm not sure if that's sort of like a misinterpretation on my part. Like, of course people are going to be dying if there's a zombie apocalypse, but nevertheless, it's sort of like it's almost becoming cliche that, okay, we need to inject some drama here, let's have this person die. And with so many people dying, it's made me numb to sort of the death in a way. It's like, okay, that's the way things operate in this universe. and that's taken away sort of some of the emotional impact of the story. But nevertheless, it's sort of it made me it does make you think, like, if some disaster were to happen, or if a zombie apocalypse were to happen, what would sort of be your contingency plans? Like if something would happen as you're watching this video right now, say like you heard this massive explosion, you heard like people like screaming outside or whatever, and then you go outside and there's like just say there are zombies like walking around and they're sort of like, you know, eating people and stuff. Like what would you do? Would you know what to do? Would you have like a survival kit or whatever? So it gets you thinking in these ways, like you know, we're living life now happy, but you know, who knows what's going to happen tomorrow? You just never know. So I like that aspect of it, like the survivalist aspect of it. I like Rick's relationship with his son. That's really sort of that's one of Robert's main cards here in the story, like having his son interact with his father, and sort of like how their relationship changes. And there was one really cool story arc where the son had to become like the father because his father was very sick, and he had to sort of step up to the plate and sort of become like become the role that Rick was embodying up until that point. I think that the son who plays the boy who plays the son in the series is very good. I think that Herschel, the farmer in the TV show, is a good adaptation. Glenn is not so much. I mean, he looks really stocky in the comics, sort of bulky. In the TV series, he's like some sort of baseball player or something. I don't know, sort of more thin or whatever. But definitely Daryl Dixon. He is, you know, one of probably the coolest, most toughest sort of, you know, male bravado characters ever. You know, he just doesn't give a crap. But watching the show and listening to these podcasts, you know, there's a lot of people saying, you know, this is stupid. Like the people wouldn't do this. They shouldn't do it this way if they really want to survive in this situation. They should do this, that, and the other. And especially in the show when they're like, oh, there's water down in that well. There's a zombie in there. It might still be good. Let's lower a person. Let's lower a person into the well. And they lowered Glenn into the well. Why the hell would they do something like that? It's just crazy. It's almost like you wanted to kill him or something. And so that was a very dumb move for that episode. But nevertheless, I will keep on watching the show because I'm interested to see where it goes. Robert Kirkman said in the comic his editorial section, keep on watching the show, and like the later half of season 2 will sort of blow us out of the water or whatever. I'm not, of course he's going to say that, but nevertheless, I'm still curious to find out what exactly the end game is here. Hopefully, it's going to go as dark as the comic, and I especially want to see Rick sort of get to the point where he's sort of like he's making all these tough decisions. It changes him a lot. He has to kill a lot of people he doesn't want to kill. We've already seen at the end of last can't remember what episode where he has to kill Sophia. That's his first, I guess, sort of progression to that sort of darker side. But I want to see him go the full way and see sort of like how that changes him as a person. There's one other, the governor. I think if they put the governor story arc, it'll be very interesting. And they should put. I agree with the people that wrote into the editor letter section that Danny Trejo should play the governor, because looking at him, he's pretty much like a visual match exactly. Should play this governor character, and that's it. I'm happy to sort of watch the show and see where it goes from there, and sort of see where the parallels go from the comic to the actual show. So yeah, The Walking Dead up to 93 issues, I believe. It's definitely an interesting comic. Not the best comic I've ever read, but I don't really have a baseline for comparison. There's other comics out there that were mentioned in this in the letter section, like Why the Last Man, or Invincible, or The Witch Doctor, The Incredible Wolfman, all these other sort of comics there. So there's a huge amount of comics to read, but nevertheless, because I was watching the TV show, I decided to watch read the Walking Dead comic. So if you have some time, check it out. If you like zombie comics, it's sort of it's a pretty good comic, but reading it is sort of in large, sort of straight, very quickly in succession. It sort of made me more aware that this comic is not as great as people were praising it to be in the letter section, but nevertheless, it still has a baseline of decency. So if you got some spare time, check it out. The Walking Dead comics, written by Robert Kirkman. Alright guys, Forristicat, going to press stop on this video now, and yeah, I'll talk to you some other time. Take care.